I'm Heath Evans. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at the Melbourne Accelerator Program, and I'm honoured to welcome you to the MAP Masterclass. Described by the Sydney Morning Herald as one of the heroes of Australian content marketing, Trevor Young has been a pioneer of Australian social media and content marketing for well over a decade. A former journalist with over 20 years of experience in professional PR consulting, Trevor is also an author, keynote presenter, and was recognised for the second time this year in Brand Quarterly's Global 50 Marketing Thought Leaders Over 50 list. I'd love to have your pizzazz when I'm 50, Trev.
I don't know how I made that, Wayne. I'm only 45.
His popular marketing blog, PR Warrior, which he started in 2007, has been listed by both Smart Company and Search Engine Journal as one of Australia's top business blogs. And we're very fortunate to have him this week to coincide with the launch of his second book titled Content Marketing for PR, How to Build Brand Visibility, Influence and Trust in Today's Social Age. And I'm sure you'll see the tights at tonight's event, and we couldn't have a better person speaking on the topic. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Trevor Young to the stage to kick off tonight's proceedings.
Thanks, Heath. All right, just doubling up there. Great to see so many faces here so quickly, straight after work. Very nicely done. We've got a action-packed, maybe not action, but jam-packed evening tonight, and so we'll kick off. But I want to ask everyone a question. Who here is in business or thinking about running a business? Hands up, high. Yep, good. We're in the right place. And put your hand up if you're very focused on that business. Now, your business, your project, your idea, your product, your service, whatever. Hands up high. Really focused. Keep them up if you might be even obsessed. Oh, no hands went down. That's great. That might be an issue. We're going to get to it. From a business point of view and getting stuff done, that's probably pretty cool. From a comms point of view, it can be an issue. And I've worked with quite a few startups over the journey, and that obsession with the business and the brand and what they do, while it's good to get things moving and get you out of bed in the day, when it comes to talking to the media, being on social media, creating content, what it can do is actually force you often to start thinking, and you default back to your brand and your product and your service all the time, which doesn't do anyone any good. So we'll cover that probably more in the panel, but I just wanted to get a feel for the room on that, because this is a bit of brand mindset, and that's a real big issue about our focus on what it is we do. Because the truth of the matter is, no one cares about your products and services except you. Sorry. Sorry. People want to know what's in it for them. What's their pain points? What's the things that they need? And in a lot of cases, they don't really care about you. Now, David Meerman Scott, best-selling author of the book New Rules of Marketing and PR, one of the best books in this space. I think it's up to now about its 6th or 7th edition, which is very different to when I first read it in 2007. He wrote that in 2008, and I don't think that's changed whatsoever. In fact, it's getting even harder as we get bombarded with so much stuff. But here's a couple of stats. Businesses think 13% of their marketing messages are unsolicited, while consumers feel 85% of the messages they receive from businesses are spam. Anyone doubt that? The other disconnect is businesses believe 81% of their marketing messages are relevant and useful, in contrast with 84% of consumers who say these communications are not useful at all. There is a pattern forming here. That's from a really good book called Marketing Rebellion by a guy called Mark Schaefer. If you get your hands on it, please do and have a look at it. So this is what we've got. We're all here as consumers. And what we're becoming very adept at doing is blocking the noise. Because there's so much noise. There's so many channels. There's more channels than ever before. And the problem with getting an explosion of channels is that a lot of brands, marketers, and a lot of people who are selling their wares or whatever it is, they're doing what they've always done, and they're using those channels to pitch. And so we are blocking ads, and we are skipping through the ads, and we're also starting to follow the people who we believe we trust, those that we trust. Is it a blog? Is it a podcast? The people behind who write for a certain magazine? We are becoming our own editors because we're picking and choosing where I get our information from because we can't take it all in. And so again, the biggest challenge we all face, anyone who's got a story to tell or a message to communicate, the biggest issue and the biggest challenge we've all got is just cutting through with respect. It's a real challenge. So where are we up to? That's a really quick overview of, there's a lot of challenges out there, there's a lot of noise. And when we're out there and we want to communicate our messages, how do we do that? We could spend a lot of money to annoy people. That's expensive and it doesn't really work very much and it's going to get harder and harder and harder. So then what? There's no silver bullet, unfortunately. If there is, I wouldn't be telling you here tonight. I'd be selling it from the Bahamas. The way I look at it, if I could say one sentence that is probably the strongest thing that we can do, is deepen the connection you have with the people who matter the most to the success of your business or cause or issue if you're a social enterprise. Which begs the question, who is important to the success of your business? Now this is where taking a PR approach kind of changes things because it's not necessarily your clients or your customers. Sure, they'd be in there, but it might be retailers on sellers. It might be financiers and the markets, fund managers. It might be the venture capitalists. It might be just the people around you in your own community. There's a great saying, don't be in a city, don't be in the city, be of the city. Be part of that community and that network that you're trying to build. And so deepen that level of connection with people. If you're wanting to go out to the media, they're a group of people, in certain journalists or radio producers or whatever it is, who are important to the success of your business if you get it right. So all of a sudden, by going down this path, you're going to start thinking strategically, who really is important and how do we then connect with them and then deepen the level of connection with them. And so what we want to be getting to is a point where we're known, liked, trusted, front of mind, and talked about in a positive way. They're all tough things to do, but if you were starting to tick all of those boxes, people know you, increasingly more people know you. They like you. Do you know what, in public relations, I've never had a brief in 20 or 30 years that said, part of this brief is to get more people to like us. And we don't do business with people we don't like. Trusted, obviously trust is the social currency of today. Front of mind, again, that visibility, that being cutting through, really, really tough today, and talked about in a positive way. So they're the things, and there's a guy called Daniel Kahneman, he was a Nobel-winning psychologist who wrote the book, and I'm going to try and get it wrong, but it's, I think Fast, Act Slow, one of the two. Act Fast and Slow, I think that's it. And he talks about these are the 5 heuristics or simple rules of every social interaction. So I'm going to just leave you with 2 things today that I think that we should be looking at. And we've only got a very short period of time, so each one of these I could go on for 3 hours on each one. But I'm just going to give you the one. One is adopt an audience-first mindset. And what we want to be doing here is developing a mindset and a willingness to develop what I call a connected brand culture. And that's where you champion content and conversation and collaboration and kinship with those around you, with the people who matter the most to the success of your business. That's a mindset. You've got to get that right first, otherwise nothing else will work. So what I see, just trying to extrapolate out on this a little bit, there's so many hacks out there. Who loves the hacks and the blueprints and the systems and the processes that you can buy in a box? Or someone does something really well and say, I'm going to do that. It might work for them, but it probably won't work for you. And I talk a lot about philosophy and yes, get inspired by people and what their other people are doing and check them out and test things. But develop your own philosophy of what's going to work for you and your brand and your values and your purpose. And so yes, we want traffic, maybe funnels. Some people get obsessed with funnels. Everything I talk about today is before the funnel. But when everyone's doing the same thing and got access to the same tools, everyone's going to start doing the same things, and that makes it very hard to differentiate. It also means that you're not connecting with people's hearts. So yes, eyeballs, fine, but this is not an eyeball game anymore. It's a game of reaching people and getting their hearts and being able to emotionally connect with them on a grander scale than in a more strategic way. So there he's talking about the concepts and the ideas and the collaborations you do and the insights that you provide and the expert commentary and the passion and the humanity with which you go about your business, the stories you tell. These are the things that resonate with people. And that's the tough stuff, but that's the thing that also differentiates you from your direct competitor. Second one is become your own media channel. We've never been at a better time. Yes, I painted a bleak picture at the start, but that's the opportunity. The opportunity is that there's no gatekeepers. We can go out and do this ourselves. We can build our own audience. And we can communicate directly with that audience. And it doesn't have to be the biggest audience. Again, who are the right people for you? It's not an eyeball game. So this is where we talk about owned, earned and social media. Quickly, owned media being those media channels you own and you run and you control. Your blog, your website, your email marketing list, your podcast, that sort of thing. Obviously with social media, you own the content you put on it, but you don't own the platforms and they can change the rules at any given stage, which we know that Facebook does. And Instagram. And all of them. And the other one is earned media, and that's when you've earned the right to tell your story. You've earned the right for a journalist to talk to you, for a radio producer to ring you up, to get a quote from you, or to speak at an event, or to be a guest on a podcast. You've earned the right for that to happen. It's not free publicity. There's no such thing as free PR. There's not. It's earned. And the other thing is, this is what we talk about, storytelling, being able to tell your story in interesting ways, in micro grabs across social media, leveraging your people. Get your people out there. Have you got internal experts? The Edelman Trust Barometer, really terrific research, tells us year upon year upon year upon year that one of the most trusted sources of information are internal experts. And yet we don't see companies putting them out there talking to people and sharing their knowledge and their ideas and their wisdom. And a part of this attitude and this mindset is also equip and upskill, because there's times when you'll need to bring people in maybe to do some really jazzy videos or whatever. The guys up the back get their cards, they'll do a good deal. But you can also do a lot yourself. In fact, sometimes the video that's rough and raw is going to work a hell of a lot better than the stuff that's really nicely polished, which is going to cost you an arm and a leg and have a deadline of about 3 weeks, and by then it's too late and no one's going to watch it anyway. So where does owned, earned and social media fit? I call this the very inventive term of the marketing communications pyramid. And down the bottom is owned and social and earned media, because this is 365 days of the year. This is the opportunity to build a moat around your brand, between your brand and your competitors. And this is the thing that will make everything else work harder. Because if people know, like, trust you, people are talking about you, and you're front of mind, when your call goes to someone from the very top, the very high touch, and you talk to someone, hopefully they've heard about you, and if not, they might check you out. And will there be validation? Will the journalist check you out? But if they have never heard of you, there's a good chance not much is going to happen. And so, yes, spend money when it's needed. Partner with events. Do sponsorships. Do paid ads on social media. Whatever works for you from a strategic point of view that makes sense and you're not burning cash. But this is the stuff that you can do. This is the stuff that makes everything else work harder. Because in advertising, we know it's a campaign. We might do 3 months on and then 2 months off. What happens in that 2 months? You've lost your visibility. Owned, earned and social media. Continue to build a very strong base that makes everything else work hard. And just quickly on content, I just break down content into 4 areas just to make it a bit more easy. There's the utility-based content, which is what we probably see a lot in when we're talking content marketing. And this is when you would have heard, what are my customers' challenges, their pain points, their issues, their informational gaps? that I can create content that helps them with those problems and pressing needs. And that's great. No one ever went wrong being useful and helpful. And that's a really good place to start. Particularly if you're open about it and it's not just a pithy FAQ at the bottom of your website that no one can see, but you've got videos for every single question that people ask and you give really good answers. And these are the how-tos and the listicles and all that. This is what you see a lot of. And it's terrific. My only fear is that over time, they're starting to become very similar. And people are just knocking them out to tick the content marketing box. So even if you do really good utility content, you might get caught up in a bit of that. Then we get leadership content, and this is where we're not really looking at people's pain points necessarily. Yes, we know our audience, but maybe we're poking them in the eye metaphorically. And I like to give the example of Seth Godin here. Who here reads Seth Godin? Good, don't let Heath see that. He wants more people seeing Seth Godin. This is mini Seth over here. But Seth Godin, he challenges people. He challenges the way they think. He wants to change people with their ideas, change the way you think about things. And sometimes it's good. Big trends, big research, all of that sort of stuff. Pushing boundaries of thought and can sometimes be uncomfortable for an audience, but it's what cuts out. It's what cuts through. So it's not either or. Sometimes you could do a utility-based content story and there's also some leadership thinking in that. But that's the push hard. That's to make people change and you try and change people with your ideas. Corporate content, everyone who's got a business has got corporate content. I just couldn't think of another term, so we're stuck with corporate. So this is corporate even if you're small. And this is behind the scenes. This is the gold. This is the stuff that no one else can replicate. Everyone else can do listicles. Everyone else who you're against and your competitor is probably doing listicles right this minute. They're at home tapping away, writing listicles. But they can't use your people. They can't shine the spotlight on your partners. They can't do any of that because they're yours. They aren't you. And this is where you got the opportunity to really take things up a notch, is to really humanise your brand and get people to connect with you. Here, we love those stories. And the other thing is, if you've won some big funding or you've just opened up in new territories, there is news. Now, sometimes what's news to you is not news to a journalist, as Steph will tell you later on. Ask her. She better tell you. But I remember I've read recently about a company that put out a press release that they've changed the carpet in the boardroom. That is not news, ladies and gentlemen. But the thing about that is news is, okay, put your press release out, do the things, tick the boxes. You've just landed some major funding and then the venture capital firm says, oh, we're going to do it like this and we're going to tick the box, and it goes through the rounds of lawyers until it's absolutely illogical and that makes no sense in the end. Put it out, don't fight it. Then put out a video from behind the scenes of why we got the funding, how we got it, what's it going to mean, the struggles we got to get there, what's the story behind the story behind the story. And that's that corporate content, and that's the biggest opportunity. And promotional content, it's okay to promote. Seriously, it is. That's why I leave it in there. But if that's all you do, then you're going to do yourself a disservice. Because the other stuff warms up the crowd and the audience for when you have got a message that's serious. So no more than 20% of your output. All right, I'll just quickly give some really top-line examples and urge you to just maybe go away and look at them. But they're just single things that have grabbed my eye over the journey. Groove is a help desk, cloud-based help desk software. And what I like about them, they talk about all sorts of things. But I like the fact that Alex Turnbull, who I believe is the CEO, he almost walked away from the company, so I'm tipping ears. But how he takes people, and he's done it over a period of time. He's blogged about the journey. And that's what's got him known. That's what has drawn people in, and a massively big, successful blog. I almost walked away from the $500,000 month company I founded. Who here is not interested in that? Come on. Why we dropped fun as a core value. Again, behind the scenes. Let's take us in. What I learned rescuing our startup from death. You get the gist. It's not just one or two. He's done it for a period of time. He showed up He's added value, he's been part of that conversation. Jenny's Splendid ice creams. At least this was a little bit more of a higher interest category than help desk software. But why I mention Jenny's is that they do take photos of their products, and that's because people like it. So they're in the position where they can. But they also take people behind the scenes. They show the farmers that make the milk that goes into the ice cream. And when in food, provenance is everything to us today. Very, very important. The other good thing with Jenny's is that it wasn't actually good. A number of years ago, they had a listeria outbreak in one of their kitchens and they had a massive recall. Now, what Jenny's did, I don't think they do it anymore, but for about 3 to 4 years, they did a year in review where you could go in and check what happened, how many ice creams, what they did, all of that sort of stuff. You could get a really good snapshot of the company at the end of the year. I love a year in a review. When I see brands do it, I know they've got it. They're onto something. Really good thing to do, particularly if you're growing and you've got a lot of nice, interesting news. And you're doing other things. They don't just talk about ice cream, but they do a lot in the community. They're a big corporation, so they don't just talk about ice cream. How many brands do you think would not hide the fact, because probably straight up they have to talk about the fact that they had to withdraw products from the marketplace? Once that was over and their obligations done, I can tell you most companies now would bury it and disappear. They wouldn't disappear, but they'd never talk about that issue again. These guys put it in their annual review. Not once, twice. That's mindset, that's attitude, that's we're open, that builds trust. And they'll build more trust by doing stuff like that. This is my favourite. This is my favourite. Who here is I can now say the word, I always had trouble. Who here is a fountain pen aficionado? There's one. There's always more than one, but there are others who people aren't putting their hands up. Go to Goulet Pens. I was doing a boardroom lunch thing once and I was telling this story and one bloke said, I just bought from them the other day. These guys are a startup, bootstrapped, husband and wife, selling fountain pens, premium pricing, much more expensive than Amazon. Now up to about 45 staff or something about that. These guys, seriously, they are so good in content marketing and social and everything I talk about. I'm trying to find a new pinnacle brand, but they keep getting better. These guys do content marketing better than anyone in the world. That's a big statement, isn't it? Anyone in the world. I'm going to stack them up. Pound for pound, with 40, let's say they got 42, just in the early 40s, 42 staff. 7, not including the 2 directors, and this guy's all over the content, 7 full-time staff on content. How many major companies have got 7? They've got about 1 or 2. Attitude, mindset. They know where it is. Look at the numbers. And Brian Goulet does a weekly, hour-long show, 50 minutes, hour and 10, hour-long show, answering people's questions about pens and ink and wax seals, if you ask him. People also ask him about the business and what they do and all that sort of stuff. But he sits there and he answers them and he acknowledges them. Now, that's only going to work when you have a strong community of people who trust you and who can ping you questions online, in email, wherever. Amazing. He's up to about 260 episodes. And that's not the only video they do. Go and have a look at it. You can learn a lot from a guy called Brian Goulet and a fountain pen company. I kid you not. Whoa. Adafruit Industries, a little bit different, a little bit geekier. They sell DIY electronics from Manhattan, in their big space in Manhattan. What I like about them, and you can go and have a look at their YouTube channel, they've got rough and ready videos coming out, bang, 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 every week, more than a few a week. But what they do once a week, on Wednesdays, they have Ask an Engineer. So you can just ask questions. It's become a real show and it's live. So they live stream to YouTube and Facebook and everywhere. And before that, they also have a thing called Show and Tell, where they invite people from their business, plus their broader community of customers and fans, to share online, on the live stream, what it is they're working on. How good is that? There is nothing better for an electronics geek to be talking to the people they buy the geekery stuff from. and the broader world that they all play in. And it's fantastic. They don't need the massive numbers, even though their numbers are massive, but they just need the right people who really love that stuff and to increase them and make them super fans. Don't just get a whole collection of eyeballs, which might look great. Get the eyeballs that matter and the people who are interested and invested, emotionally connected to what it is you're selling, so they buy more and then they tell more people about it. Adafruit Industries. Who's here heard of Adafruit Industries? We got one? Oh, I got two. Excellent. Have you bought from them? You have. Have you bought a Goulet pen before? No. And Buffer. Buffer is a social media tool, so you'd hope they got this bit right, but there are a lot of social media tools who don't get it right. Buffer does everything that's right in social and content as well. Now, I reckon when you've tweeted 423,000 times, I've tweeted a lot, and I think I'm about 60,000. How many are you up, Stan? That's a lot of tweets. But they go all in on their channels. They go all in. So 1 million followers, all that. But over on the right, that's just some of the quality of the stuff. Their articles are first rate, top notch. They get back to you. They're human. They add value. Everything they do is really, really good across all the channels. I'll leave you with this slide. I will have to read this one because I don't know this off the top of my head, but it's a good one. A guy called Austin Kleon, who I think he calls himself a writer who draws, or an artist who writes. One of the two. If you want fans, you have to be a fan first. If you want to be accepted by a community, you have to first be a good citizen of that community. If you're only pointing to your own stuff online, you're doing it all wrong. You have to be a connector. The writer Blake Butler calls this being an open node. If you want to be noticed, you have to notice. Shut up and listen once in a while. Be thoughtful. Be considerate. Don't turn into human spam. Be an open node. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Trevor. I absolutely love that. And I'm really excited to get into this next part of the evening. I'd like to introduce Malia Rayner, who is the Senior Communications Strategist at PR agency Character and Distinction, a very close friend of ours at MAP. And I'd like to welcome her up and she can introduce the next part of the evening.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to take a seat. Is that cool? I'm going to take a seat. Cool. Hi, everyone. Yes, as Heath mentioned, I'm from Character and Distinction. We do a bit of work with MAP and we're really excited to be here. And like Trevor, we help founders and brands tell their story. So Trevor outlined to us tonight how important it is to take a content-first approach. And I think the resounding advice that I would take from Trevor's wonderful keynote is the idea that you don't want to be something for everyone, you want to be everything for someone. And so really honing in on who your audience is and how they connect to you is really the first step. But we're going to unpack that. We're going to keep pushing on and get some expert input. So I'd like to invite Trevor back up and get the rest of our panel on. So alongside Trevor, we have Rob Ward, who is the co-founder of Melbourne-based startup Quadlock. Woohoo! If you haven't heard of Quadlock, and I hope you have, they are the strongest, most secure and convenient iPhone case mounting system. And now that Quadlock is shipping to over 150 countries, you were saying, selling into the millions of products, then you know that content really can move your brand. We also have Stephanie Parmidarian, editor at Startup Smart. Come on up. Steph is the reporter on startup news, analysis, industry trends, and has an expert sense of what makes a founder or a startup newsworthy and what probably makes them not. We're going to share some stories about that. And as an editor, Steph takes an audience-first approach every day. So, let's kick off. I wanted to start by building on what we've learned from Trevor so far. Where can you start to build connection and trust through content?
A microphone does work, thanks. Sorry, could you repeat that? I was trying to fiddle with the microphone.
Sure. Where can people start, or people and brands, how do we start to build connection and trust through content? If I were to start today...
Yeah, I think the key thing is not to try and do everything because you'll go nuts. And you're still working a day job, maybe 2 jobs, or you're focused on what it is you do. So I'd cherry pick, I'd be certainly working out going back to that original question, who are the people that matter most to the success of our business? Now, that might be your customers and clients, but you might have other things. There might be influencers who get to those people. So if that's the case, who are those influencers? And maybe it's building relationships with them. So you really need to stop and think that side. But once you sort of work your audience out, but let's just say it is, these are our ideal clients or our ideal customers, and you get to understand them a little bit more, not just like demographics, but deeper, what drives them, what their fears are, that sort of stuff. What inspires them, I like. Everyone in content marketing, there's a lot about fear and a lot about pressing needs and all that, and I get it, and I get the psychology behind it, but also look at what inspires them, what gets them excited. That side of things as well. So that's probably the first one. And then is, okay, where are they online? And if that's a matter of, picking Twitter or LinkedIn, maybe it's a business audience, just focus on LinkedIn and get that right. I've seen people that do it really well. They start with one and then they might go to a podcast a year later and then they might do a blog 2 years later or whatever. I'm a believer in having a blog as your digital heart, and you build everything from there. Maybe 1 or 2. Twitter is the influence channel to me, so I think if influence is big for you, then Twitter is good. If your audience is more mainstream consumer, it's hard to go past Facebook. And then just learn about that and put out good stuff and start talking about your journey and what's going on behind the scenes, and when there's some really good stuff out. Identify the people who become your fans, who might follow you and connect with you and like your stuff. Do you know who they are? Talk to them. So start small and build up.
What about you, Rob, from a founder perspective? Where did you start with Quadlock?
Yeah, well, I think picking your channels is a really good point. And I think probably early on we did a bit of everything, but then sort of with that sort of analytical approach, just do more of what's working for you. So, being okay at everything isn't that great. Being good at something is a lot better. So for us, I think originally, like when we started, like you say, Twitter's influence, we're probably more visual people when we started. And I don't think at the time you could even put a photo on Twitter. So for me, Twitter dropped off pretty quick because we're just not that good at it. But there's all these other things opening up, photos, then video became a thing, and extend on that. It's you want to sort of swim downstream, play to your strengths, but then I see founders that are just so headstrong on this is the direction, and that can be really a problem at a certain point, because if you're thinking it's all about this, but all the people are over here and they're thinking that, you sort of either got to, to succeed, you got to change sometimes, or just, it's not a change, it's like just a little bit of a redirection to go, actually, no, this is the way they want to hear about it. This is what is cool. This is what they connect with. Or you can keep doing your own thing, but don't expect anyone to sort of come with you, I suppose.
I like that you also said if it's something that you want to do, because you might say that, okay, video is the best thing for us, and you hate being on video. You hate it with a passion. Don't do it. Work out another way of doing it. Yeah. But if you're a good writer, play to your strengths. So you've got to be able to balance of how do people want their, to be honest, these days they want their information in different ways. Some people rather read, write, listen, watch. But in the early days, you play to your strengths as well.
At the start, you can't do everything awesome. Like very difficult while trying to build a business and everything else.
Makes sense. Steph, how do you find stories then? What kind of channels do you look to? I know you're probably on Twitter. LinkedIn, do you get pitched stories, or how do you kind of start to find those founders and brands?
Sorry. For me, when it comes to finding stories, there's sort of lots of different avenues. Like, we get pitched an awful lot, and that sometimes is the best way to reach me, and sometimes emails just sort of get lost. I also kind of browse through Twitter every morning, and I'll have a little squiz through LinkedIn as well. People send me LinkedIn connection requests all the time, which is sometimes fine, but write a little note and tell me what you want. Otherwise, I'm just probably not going to accept it. Yeah. But there's lots of different things. But I think sometimes for me to sort of reach out to somebody else to ask them to provide me with a comment or to kind of get a story from their perspective, it's helpful if they sort of have a presence online and they're already blogging about stuff and they're already tweeting about stuff. And if I've seen somebody like do a little tweet thread that's ranting about something, then if I'm then writing about that thing, I'll reach out to that person and say, like, can I call you? So I think from my perspective, what I want from founders in that situation is to like be responsive and get back to me and give me your number and answer your phone and turn around a quote in the 2-hour time frame that I'm going to completely unreasonably give you. So I think when it comes to sort of building trust, that's kind of my perspective on it, that if I know you're a reliable person and you're going to speak passionately about a certain thing and you're going to crucially pick up your phone and speak to me on the fly, then I'll call you again next time, and then I'll ask you to contribute to something else, and then I'll kind of have that trust that you're a good source and a helpful person to sort of have on my contacts list. Is that helpful? Does that answer the question? Okay.
If Steph does ring you and she wants you to talk and you're on the fly and you're really frazzled, do say, I'll call you back in 5 minutes.
Oh yeah, that's
Do call back, take 5 minutes to take a breath, gather your thoughts, then do it. There's been a lot of people, particularly on radio, they get called up and they're still half asleep at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that's when they say something silly.
Yeah, that's true.
I won't ring you at 6 though.
I absolutely won't ring you at 6. Yeah, 8. Yeah, give me 5 minutes. Like, call me back in 5 minutes, totally fine. But if you say, like, oh, I can speak to you at 4 o'clock this afternoon, then that's just not helpful to me.
Sorry. No, that's all right. I think we're going to get another microphone, so I won't keep pinching it off you. In order to develop the channels that you want to be on and develop the content that's going to be of value, you know, taking it back a step further, you really need to know that audience. We talked a little bit about finding them through the channels that they're on. But even before that, you know, it's not just a demo. It's about finding those people who will be fans and turning them into customers, or vice versa, both. Maybe Rob, you could start by sharing, you know, how you started, like where did you begin to understand your audience in terms of from Quadlock's early, maybe from the crowdfunding that you did, or how did you start to get a sense of who these people were when you were really early stage?
Yeah, we definitely, I think we definitely started to get a sense from crowdfunding. The problem is that you get, especially early days of crowdfunding, it was like a typical type of person on crowdfunding, and the market for us was a little bit bigger than that anyway, but probably didn't know that until afterwards. So it's good to get a feel of that. But then it's just really, for us, it was a lot of trying and testing of different messages and different things that people were interested in. And when we first started out, actually, it's different now, but when we first started out, people were actually interested in how we were doing what we were doing, not just the widget, just like, you know, the why are you doing it, what are you doing, that kind of story. And we ran with that for probably a couple of years. But then at a certain point, we realized, like, you got to sort of grow up a little bit as well.
That story.
Yeah, we told that story, exactly. And then we sort of, you know, moved on from that to be, and also, like, you don't want to, at a point, you don't want it to be about you, it's about the brand as well. And then we moved on from that, and then from there, it was more about, we also expanding what we were doing, but then it's also like leveraging what we do right now is leveraging other people's stories. So, you know, you're never going to run out of stories if you've got a community of people anyway. So things like, just recently we've done something called a Quadlock feature. So we're just featuring other cool businesses and cool people that have a similar audience to us that I sort of call it hanging out with the cool kids. So, you know, there might be another smaller business or a big business or whatever, or a pro athlete or just something, and you can, you know, we do like a full feature on them. And Quadlock's hardly involved, but it becomes our content. We share it, but it's still all relevant to our audience. And all of a sudden, it's very relevant to their audience, and their audience becomes our audience. So just things like that, that kind of longer game.
Yeah, you let your customers tell your story.
Yeah, definitely.
And they're empowered to tell it, but then they're providing more and more people to come on board.
And then it's just like, after that, it just comes back to do things and see what happens. And a lot of this stuff, I think, is fairly cheap to do. And you can afford not for everything to work. So we can sit here and say, oh, once we made a video and we pitched it to, I don't know, back when Gizmodo was pretty big, and we pitched it to them, and it was for, I don't know, what was it for? April Fool's Day. And it was a fun idea, it went really well, day later, 500,000 views. And it sounds great. We've done other stuff that just completely fall flat, but it doesn't matter because you do three things. The one that hits is so worthwhile doing. But I also kind of think, I like to think about it as in you can have eyeballs and influence that is spikes, which is that core kind of PR thing that you can do, and you can't, we're not a media company, can't release enough content really to have a constant spike. So what we do is we have spikes, but then we have scalable media or scalable eyeballs, which is we've worked out that people want to see this at certain times, and we can show that to different groups of people or different people, and it's the same content, but not everyone's seeing it at the same time, and we can get that out there, and the only thing we need to scale that is dollars. And so we can scale that there, and we can do this there. And at different times in your journey as a business or a startup or as a scale up, this mix can change with you, because it's hard just to click your fingers and have heaps more PR tomorrow. But if you know you've got something that's working, you can click your fingers and have a lot more eyeballs tomorrow. They may not be as valuable, may not be the same, but when you have that mix, it's like you have trust and influence over here. And then when you do something which is just show a lot of people your content by paying for it, it tends to work a lot better because you've done this other hard work over here. So I think the mix is very important. If you just did one without the other, probably not as good outcome.
Anything you've seen from the way you work with founders on that, Trevor?
Yeah, body of work is the main thing. It's in it for the long haul and trying new things. I mean, the thing is, I probably less about going for a viral video or anything. I just like to see growth and steady, scalable growth, and work with people so they can still do it internally, and it's not going to knock around their business, but they can still connect with more people over the journey. So it's building and building and building and building. And there's one thing that I think that we often lack in business is that our focus goes straight to our customers and our clients, but we forget about the people who like us, who might be friends or friends of friends or influencers, and they're never going to be a customer for whatever reason. But they will promote you and they will do everything for you because you've looked after. I call it your village of support. Who are those people around you who know, like, trust you and will help you in your time of when you want a little bit of jazz up? And I think it's a really good organic way to do it. And once you build that base, as Rob said, and everything, well, then you've got the dollars to play with it, and that's when you can get really smart with your analytics and your targeting and all of that sort of stuff. But it's building that base and then starting to do other things on top of it. It's the good combo.
Yeah, that makes sense. You both spoke a little bit about the kind of life cycle of founders and startups and how there's different roles that you play and different stories that you have to tell. Steph and I were talking ahead of the panel about how you can get a lot of we exist pitches in startup, and no doubt you both have awareness of this, which is like the classic company, hey, letting you know we're a company, these are the people involved, this is our product or service, and there's not really a story in that necessarily. With that said, in the startup life cycle or the roadmap, when are some common times that you might be pitched to, and what kind of stories do you look for?
So first of all, we don't write those I'm a business, I exist stories, but there are publications that do. So if you want that kind of coverage, then there are options that will write it. But for us, what we're essentially looking for is a story that there is a reason that we're telling this story today or this week or this month. So it could be that it's you've only just launched, but it's a really interesting, innovative thing that is completely going to disrupt a whole industry. And it's something that we haven't seen before, and it's come from an interesting place. We won't cover any old business that just launches, but if there's something really, really unique about this business that has launched, we'll consider it. Then there's obviously funding rounds. We cover those, pretty much any size. The big ones are obviously they get the eyeballs on them. But also again, as a rule, we don't do product launches, but again, if your product is like something really revolutionary, then we will think about it, like let us know. And other than that, it's things like, after that, it gets to a point where you have to sort of tell us details. So like revenue milestones are a really good one. If you've grown very quickly, very fast, that's always really interesting. Or just if you've kind of grown your startup in a sort of unusual way and you think that's sort of a story that's worth telling, then let us know. It might not be something that is like newsworthy on that particular day, but it might be something I put in my little like to come back to inbox and come back to for a profile for another time. So I know it's really vague and not particularly helpful just to say that it has to be something interesting, but that's basically it. A kind of a rule is to think about why you're telling me this now and what's going to be different if you pitch me again this time next year, for example. That's kind of as close a kind of guidance I can give, I think.
And if you put revolutionary in a press release, just be very careful. It'd want to be, and most aren't.
Or disruptive, innovator, game-changing, visionary. They're all so tired.
Yeah, it has to actually be one of those things.
Something I was going to add to that is that I think it's I love the thing you said at the start about, I don't know what you said, but pretty much no one gives a shit, because I always put that lens on everything we ever do, and I always tell my guys no one gives a shit. So if you start with that, it's sort of a good place to be, because you go, how do I make someone give a shit? And the other part to it is, for me, when we used to do a fair bit of PR, I always thought, you don't care about us. It's nothing that amazing. We're not that amazing, but what's a spin or what's something that makes your job easier? Not here's us. You find the story in there. It's like, we're here and this is our story. Can you do something with it? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And the more work you do on that, effectively, almost like some of the stuff we've published, we've gone back through and looked at it and like, this is literally what we wrote. It's almost copy paste at times, and in big publications. So if you make it easy and you got something of value, it's so much more likely to get a hit for you. And I think a good example we were talking about earlier was when like the new iPhone is released today, not released, but announced today at the Apple event, and we'll all be getting them next Friday. Next Friday we'll
be getting them in this room. Is that what you? No.
Hopefully, lots of people get them. But yeah, they're pretty dear. Yeah, but great phone. No, but the thing is, that phone will come out first in Australia, for the whole of the world. So what we do every year is we go and get the phone 10 different ways, get it as early as we can, go and take the best photos possible in the shortest amount of time. We have a whole heap of content written, and we have just a few. It's not even a press release, it's pretty much just a story. We don't put all the stuff at the top. We don't hardly do anything, and we just email it to a few people and say, here's photos, because there's people, and all the journos have right now are photos of iPhone 10s in their hands at the Apple event. They don't actually have it on someone running or on a bike or anything like that. So the value is not that, hey, we're quad lock and you can put it on your bike and we're strong and we're secure and we're used by millions of people over the world. The value is, here's a photo of an iPhone 11 Pro on a bike, and no one else in the world has that. And they'll publish it because there's value in it for them. They still don't give a shit about us, but we'll be in that story. So, yeah.
You're thinking about them first, and
it's just like selling a product.
They need.
Yeah, it's just like selling a product. Think about them first, because, like I say, no one gives a shit about you.
No.
They just don't.
And so in that case, you look at it. Who's someone that's relevant to your business? Well, then it's journalists or it's other people or bloggers or whatever. And what's of interest and relevance to them that you can add value to, adding value. So that's that whole thing brought to life. That's absolutely perfect. And just thinking it through and taking that step back. It's not about us and our products and our services. How can we add value to something that people are already interested in?
And it's the thing with this is, it's not hard and it's not expensive. And the plus side to it is when that story is written, it will get read as well. So it's like when you say someone writes to you, hey, we're interesting because of this, and you put it in the pile, maybe do a feature later on. Even when you do the feature, is it going to be read? Like, what's valuable to the company is not being able to say, hey, we got 10 articles. You got 10 articles that month that nobody read. It still doesn't mean anything to the startup. But if you get 10 articles, if you get one article that gets read a shitload, and then the other smaller blogs see that one article, they'll all republish it, and it just, so you only really need those 1 or 2 good quality hits.
I think as well what's important here is like knowing why you, like from a media perspective, it's knowing why you want to be in the media, like who are you trying to reach? Because my readers are typically startup founders and business owners and people who are interested in that space or getting into it, or investors. If that's not who you want to get in front of, then I'm not your person. But there's a magazine for everything. There's like a niche fishing magazine. There's like going to be like a niche sewing or crochet magazine. Like every hobby has a magazine. Every industry has a magazine. Like if you just look out into like the media that's in your space and reach out to them and send your email that's like, hi, we're interesting to your readers because then you have a much higher chance of getting published.
And with media, it's not just online publications or the more traditional side of things, and sometimes they're going to be the hardest ones to get to because you've got a lot of competition around you. Often a way of building up to that is through bloggers and podcasters and power tweeters, and that is identifying those people and then building relationships with them in a genuine way and adding value to their life. And if you're going to pitch a blogger is not a journalist, so bloggers are very hard to. Bloggers want something first, or they want an experience or something like that because they're passionate about it, and often they're not getting paid. But they might have a smaller audience, but they'll have often a very, very passionate audience if they've been around for a little bit. So, cast the net and be very strategic with who you go with. And I remember a very big PR firm in the States, and one guy's worked there, and he said we had a client, and it really ticked every box, and it should have made the tech crunches of this world, and we just couldn't make it happen. So sometimes that happens. Sometimes we see the story and the journo doesn't, and vice versa. But then they went away, and so they got knocked back by all the big guys, the influential publications. Then they went away and they started small and just built up. And then the big guys came to them because it generated a bit of heat and a bit of talkability about their brand.
I think this comes back to really knowing your customer, really knowing what they care about. If they're not reading, like we work with a lot of Gen Z brands, they don't care. Their customers are not reading the AFR. So even if the founder has, a desire to be published on, the magazine they're reading, if their audience don't consume that content and don't respond to that content and aren't there, it really doesn't have any bottom line effect. So you're absolutely right, and I think we've said this across the panel that it's not just about where you want to be, but it really comes back to knowing who your audience are and what they want, and then working backwards from that. I want to ask actually from each of your perspective, we've talked a lot about how to do it right, but what are some common things that people do wrong in this space, and how can you start to overcome that? Maybe Trevor, you've got some stories.
There's lots of stories, lots of war stories. That's why my nickname is the PR Warrior, because I've been in the trenches I've got the bloody knuckles. It's rather than just be about the stories, though, I think it was come back to that early slide about being so focused in what you do and obsessed with your own brand. And that really, but having those blinkers on when it comes to this side of things is where, and they are stories, because I've been with startups and we talk about this, we can talk about this, and you've got some great stuff happening over here and you've got a point of view on this industry. Yeah. What about this product? What about the, everything goes back. We had one, I do have a war story. We had one client, and I reckon, and this is the media relations side of what I've done in the past, albeit on more content and social these days, but we had one guy, quite a good brand, just about to break through, and never really been introduced to the media. So we said, well, let's just introduce, because you've never actually talked to anyone before, and we'll just introduce you, and we'll do it really softly, no press release, just introduce your product, and this is who you are and what you're doing, and your plans, and just intro. Often that's the best thing, intro. And just talk. And the problem was, and we had probably almost 100% hit rate, which is unreal in this space, and it really worked a charm, except that he just kept ringing them and banging on about his product. And I got to the point where I said, I'm taking you off the account. Well, he was the owner. You can't do that. Like, we won't work with you. So we quit, and he didn't like it and all of that. But that was the problem, is that he put off journos because they weren't interested in just him banging on about how good his stuff was. So that was really disappointing, because the opportunity was so ripe, and early days it worked a treat, and he just had to just tickle it along. But was so obsessed. I won't mention the brand, mate. It's in someone else's hands now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think retrospectively you look back and you see different things, but I end up talking to a fair few founders early stage, and it's I usually always will say something different, but the whole being so passionate and being so, I think the thing is, it's a juxtaposition of to found something, start something, you got to be so in it and so, desperate to do it, that then when you do it, you are so in it and desperate to do it that you're too close to it, and you can't be logical at times. And for some people that's harder than others as well. And I don't know, I've met with so many people where there's almost an obvious of what they should do, and there's what they're doing, and they just can't move away from that initial vision. And I'm always thinking, this is going to be hard if you can't either let that go or do that. And it can be that, they want to sell to this type of people. It can be that they want to be in this kind of retail store. And you realize you will make no money, and I think so. But I think at the end of the day, it could be that you want to be in the same, like this publication. And once again, you said before, are the people who care about you reading that publication, or do you read that publication? And it's kind of like, yeah, you got to really be honest with yourself and go, okay, what's going to make the difference? Where should I put the time? Where should I put the effort? Admittedly, you do things for yourself at times, but if you're thinking about the brand and the business, you'll probably do some different things will be better for the brand and the business, less your ego, less what your preconceived ideas are, because they're not always right. And I mean, if you go into something and you nail it straight away, who the customer is, where they are, who they hang out with, which journalists, I don't think it's going to probably happen that way. If you did, great. If you have an assumption, you sort of got to start with something. Then you can pivot from there and change your messaging or your positioning or whatever it is from there. But then at a certain point, you're going to get pulled one way or the other, and you just sort of got to go with it. And when you go with it, understand why you're doing it. And then at that point, you realize, okay, no, I am doing this because the brand or the whatever it is, the business is your baby, and you just want the best for them. So you're gonna get them there somehow.
For me, people doing it wrong, it comes back to the availability thing. It's happened to me too many times that somebody will send a press release, which is a really interesting story that I do want to write that day, and I'll call, and they're like, "Oh, I can't talk. I'm about to get on a plane for 8 hours," and I'm like, "That's just about timing. Don't send out your press release on the day when you're traveling internationally," and it's infuriating.
Has that happened more than once?
Yeah. Yeah. I know, from a PR perspective, it's not good. The other thing, and I don't know if you're going to agree with me on this one, but I tend to find you get a much better interview and therefore a much better story if founders are sort of not too media trained. I'm going to ask you about your revenue figures and about your growth figures, and it's fine to say oh, I don't want to talk about that. That's great. But if you can tell me, that's brilliant. But aside from that, it's just be yourself and be open and be honest and let your personality shine through. And then I will write up your little ad lib comments so that if they're funny, and I think then you get a story that you really get your personality through. And we learn a bit more about sort of you and the why behind it and everything. And I just think that helps kind of give a sense of what the business is all about. So to conclude, I think just don't be too polished in everything you're saying. Don't practice your interview before you start. Just be yourself. Yeah.
We're going to have an audience Q&A now, so if anyone's got a question that they'd like to start with, I think I can see a hand up at the back.
I thought that means we ask them questions. That's the other way.
Black shirt.
Hi, thank you. Trevor, I had a question for you. I thought, well, anyone can answer it. Any insights into what's happening with Instagram, reach, taking away likes? What are you seeing? What do you see works? And if there's any sort of hacks or like trends or things that you're seeing in terms of maintaining engagement.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Rob's probably doing more on Instagram. I mean, the things that we're seeing in Instagram, and I'm probably not as deep into it as a couple of the people that work with me, but it's going to go the way of Facebook anyway. I mean, it's like crack cocaine, isn't it? It's if it's not already there, it's just more ads, and all of that's strangling organic reach, and the model's already laid out and it works. So important to keep the audience that you've got and build slowly rather than try and because the fact of the matter is, they're going to do that. They've taken out the likes already, so they're changing things up. But that said, I'm still seeing some really terrific results from people on it. I think the hardest thing that most people are finding is the growth on it. It can be a hard channel to grow unless you're in a visual business, and that really makes a lot of sense. You do beautiful pictures and stuff like that. That's when it grows well. And the other thing I see that works really well is really the strategic use of hashtags. I still think that apparently there is a golden number, which I don't know because it keeps changing. But there's how many? 23, is it? No, I don't know. But that is one thing that we're doing. But the quality is going up, is what I'm seeing. It's probably doing less and doing it much better. And that's depending again on your business. If you're a visual business, you have to be there. But I'll hand over to you because you've got a good following.
I think it depends on what you want from the platform, and if you want, if followers are the thing you want, or if lots of likes on a photo you want, or if you want people to buy your product. It's different ways of going about all of those things. I think for us, maybe only a year ago, we saw that as we've done more over time, as in we used to just be like a cycling product, and then we're like a car product, and then we're a motorcycling product, and we're a running product. We're all these different verticals, and to the runner, the motorcyclist stuff, they don't care. So one thing we did recently, I think it's a year ago now, is we split out motorcycles, cycling, and then we have our main sort of quad lock case account. We split the accounts out. And because for us, the number, 25,000, 17,000, 18, these numbers don't really mean anything. They're sort of a vanity metric. But what means something is, people seeing what we're doing and then buying a product. So, we're probably selling more on Instagram now than we've ever sold before. And a lot of that comes from it's clunky to set up, but we do things like we're running ads through our quad lock moto page just for the motorcycle, because not everyone clicks on a link in an ad and goes straight to your product and buys. A lot of people click on your on the header, go to your profile page and look, who are these guys? What are they doing? And then when they see all this cool moto content that's super relevant just to exactly what they're into, they're like, cool, it doesn't matter to us if they follow us or not. In fact, I'd rather they don't follow us. I'd rather them click the link, go straight to the website, put their email to get a discount in. We now own them in the audience. They buy the product or not buy the product. We can remarket to them, but we've got that connection and there's no one else in the way. So I think, when it comes to success on Instagram, I think it comes back to all the way, what are we looking to get from the platform? And if you know what you're looking to get, then you can start to get a strategy that'll get you there.
Cool. Thank you. Great advice. Trevor, do you know how to get a blue tick?
So get verified.
Oh, on Twitter?
It doesn't make a difference.
Only on Twitter. I don't do it on Instagram. I'm more of a Twitter guy. And there is a way to do it, and I'm just too lazy to do it. So it is doable, but that's only on Twitter.
And Rob, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, did you achieve the holy grail of having one of the Kardashians wearing your product?
Yeah.
And the thing I'm really interested in is, did that visibility lead to influence and trust?
No. Kylie Jenner was using it for, months in all her selfies, literally photos with 5 million likes. And I didn't see a big difference. But then we'll get someone who's got a motorcycling following of 50,000 people, not 23.5 million or whatever she had at the time, and they'll do a post and we'll just the site will light up. So it really comes back to like who's your audience and why do they care. I think Kylie was probably using our tripod adapter, and so to take photos, so no one ever saw why she actually had that case on. So it meant nothing to all her people.
We've got time just for one more question.
Probably two more.
Okay, coming down.
Hi, thank you very much for tonight. Amanda Derham. Just interested generally to how you view the future of influencers. Do you see them being more and more important and more embedded, or do you see them fading out as people become more savvy themselves? Just interested in your views.
There's two sides to the influencer coin. There's influencer relations, which is less about commercial value and more about adding value and building relationships with people so they actually like you. And then there's the pay to play, which is like, it's almost like a media play, bang, tick, gone, you know. And I don't think much of that side of things because it's too one-off. And are those people influential in the first place? I think the biggest trap that everyone's found themselves in that is, yeah, it makes sense, but then are they influential? Not always. And have they got, you know, are their followers real? And there's that sort of things. And I think the more we hear those stories about that, that starts to knock the shine off it. What won't change is influencer relations, and that is building relationships with bloggers and people and tweeters and anyone else in your space, and adding value to their life and that side of things. That's not going to change. I think, and that's probably the more organic way to do it. The other, has it jumped the shark? Not yet, but I think we're becoming more circumspect, and they talk about nano influencers now. And that's, to me, where the space is. I think that whole vanity of big numbers, let's just tick a box. The moment it goes probably through the media buyers, that's the way they look at it. PR people will look at it differently, and they'll look probably smaller. Harder work, but a lot more effective. But isn't that the way it is? You know, the harder the work and the more grunt that you do and the slower it is, the better it's going to be in the long term, rather than I could tick a box, pay this money, and they do something and hallelujah.
Yeah, definitely the whole just one post, one payment. Like, we don't bother with any of that. But, you know, like, I think, like, influence won't change. Influence has been around for ages. Like, people are influential and they're just exerting that influence in different ways and building those audiences in different ways. The thing I think that's different is that this sort of, you know, pay for a post it's just very see-through. Like, you know when it's happening. Where if you've got, like, we have influencers that don't necessarily have massive followings, but they just got onto our product and liked our product, and then they've just used our product as they've grown their influence over time. And I don't know what they would have sold us as in actual users. It would be much bigger than anything else we've tried. But the thing is, now, like, the new iPhone's out, we'll just send them the case, we'll send them that. There's no payment, but what they're looking for is they're trying to build their influence. So we help them build their influence, and, you know, it's not this just commercial arrangement. It's a bit more personal than that. And then when someone sees that you've been doing stuff with them, they've been doing stuff with you over, you know, 3 or 4 months, it's just in their mind. They don't even know they've been influenced, because no one really wants to be influenced, I don't think. But when you, especially in certain markets, maybe they do, but when it just is that total organic thing that gets out there and just grows by itself, that's where I think you're really winning with that kind of thing. But just pay for post, I think in a few markets it does work, but in a lot of markets it's very, very, very tough.
Everyone's influential somewhere along the line, and I think if you've got a business where you've got fans and super fans, there's a new book out by a guy called Pat Flynn, just out, called Super Fans, and it's how to, you know, make people who are connected and then subscribers, and then they get up to super fans, and they're influencers. They love your product, and that's the genuine stuff. That's the holy grail, but that's earned. You can't buy that.
I mean, this is sort of not really at all my area of expertise, but sort of similar to that last point, my kind of observation someone who doesn't really know what they're talking about, is that it appears that there's sort of less of the kind of really, like you said, it's more targeted stuff, like people who actually genuinely like the product. I think when people are sort of just pushing something they don't really care or know about, then it's quite obvious. Equally, like, just be great and people will rave about your product. Like, we've seen this with kind of the rise in the neobanks. They've all got these like really brightly coloured new cards, and you go out and you use a card and people are like, what's that? And you're like, oh, it's this new bank, it's amazing. And then you're like, oh, what am I doing? Like, I'm just like I don't work for them, I just really like it. And I think that's actually more powerful. Like, just be really good and people will talk about your product.
And they've got a common enemy.
Yeah.
We've got time for one more.
Thank you. Just a question for the panel. Gary Vaynerchuk was in Melbourne recently, and he claims to be posting 100 pieces of content a day. And Rob spoke about the challenges of getting on Instagram and established platforms, but he was talking very much and talking up LinkedIn and a platform called TikTok. I was just wondering what the panel's view of these new emerging platforms is.
TikTok?
I think, I think Gary Vee has a certain audience and he knows his audience very well. I think that's one thing for sure. I mean, I've heard this 100 pieces of content thrown around, and it's like good PR. It's notable. Like, are we doing 100 pieces of content? No way. We don't do 100 pieces of content a month. I don't know many people who can do 100 pieces of content, but it gets you thinking, I just need to do more frigging content. So it's, yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, it's very general. The thing is, I think, like Gary Vee is a good example of getting on something early. I think he was an investor and he was put a lot of effort into something called Vimo. Does anyone know Vimo? It's like a failed YouTube, pretty much, So, yeah, it's kind of like a Vine, that kind of thing. But the thing is, he went hard there, and it didn't pay off for him. But he just goes so hard everywhere, something's going to pay off at some stage. So it's kind of like a machine gun approach. It's done okay for him. So I think, you've got to take that with a grain of salt. Something like TikTok is like his Vimeo. There's so many things popping up all the time now, and the thing is, a good example of a TikTok and where it's popular is with young kids. It's really fast, it's really punchy, it's addictive. You can just smash through really short, small videos. But people are going there to be entertained. I don't know if they're going there like an Instagram. You're going there to learn, to be entertained, but to look at something pretty, to be, inspired by something, blah, 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 blah. If you just want to see people twerking or something, you're on TikTok going, what is this rubbish? I don't know. So I also think it's kind of like if you go back to just anything that's new that pops up has a potential to be the next massive thing. The thing is, if you're relying on being early on a platform to be popular, eventually early is not going to cut it. You've got to be good. So I sort of think, someone who's good on Vine will be good on TikTok, right? But just because you're there, yeah, you may get 100,000 followers, but pretty soon no one's going to care about you because actually they followed you because you were there, not because you were good. So I'd be putting being good at something first.
And the thing with TikTok is your audience there first. We do see a lot of people jumping onto these things. I mean, I often do just to have a look, but I don't recommend them most of the time. The thing with Gary, and I'm a Gary Vee fan, but I understand that he's pretty omnipresent. But he has got a team behind him. I mean, he's got a guy that follows him around with video. He's got 500 or 600 staff in his thing. So what he can get all that research and he'll immerse, and he does more in a day than probably most of us would do in a week. He's written it's a pretty prominent, I think, on his website. He's got a really meaty ebook, let's call it a downloadable ebook or PDF, about how he cascades I call it cascading, how he repurposes his content. And it's one thing that I'm a big fan of doing that. Big chunky things and then repurposing it all the way down the line and being really smart and strategic about it, because why reinvent the wheel? But if you go to garyvaynerchuk.com or garyv.com and try and find that one about repurposing his content, it's pretty much front and centre last time I saw it. It's a really meaty read. He lets you right in the back, behind the scenes of how he does it, and it's pretty good, and I think it's worth a read. And that type of thing is smart. That's when he's doing things smarter. But, you know, no one's going to be Gary V. He's one of a kind. And I think the thing is that if you want to be the personal brand fronting the business, and if Gary V is 10 out of 10 in terms of everything he does, then if you're 5% of that, you're going to be better than the next person. So use him as a benchmark, but don't try and emulate, because it's going to be too bloody hard.
Well, I was getting very comfortable down there, and I'm conscious of time, and I thank everyone for coming out tonight. It's been an incredible night. A huge thanks to the panel. We've got some fascinating perspectives, so if you wouldn't mind putting your hands together for the panel.